more we can personalise, the better the chances that your child will respond to those treatments. And look, inflation is crazy. It's getting harder and harder to just live these days, just paying the bills and the electricity and the food. And we don't have the money to be wasting on supplements that aren't actually working and possibly hindering. And particularly, it's so important to do things in the right order. If they've been given the wrong, maybe the right supplement, but at the wrong time, in the wrong order, you can mess everything up. It's really important that we do things in the right order. So we have to put the fire out first. The house is on fire. No point bringing a new couch into a burning house.
Hello and welcome to Autism Parenting Secrets. My guest today is Dr. Heather Way, PhD. She is director and head researcher at the Australian Centre for Genomic Analysis, or TACGA. And she is also a mom to two boys who have both recovered from autism using TACGA strategies. And she's helped almost 1,000 children dramatically improve their quality of life, often going from nonverbal to being mainstreamed. Dr. Way was mentioned back in episode 148. That was our discussion with Dr. Sharon Hausman-Cohen titled, Have a DNA Precise Plan. And Dr. Way was the inspiration for the Intellex DNA Neurodevelopmental Genomics Report, which is geared toward helping individuals with autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders. As a researcher, scientist, and mother, Heather has many insights to share. But one secret we will definitely touch on is embrace autism nutrigenomics. Welcome, Dr. Way.
Thanks so much, Len. That's a lovely introduction. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you. Well, it was lovely meeting you last week at the MAPS conference, the Medical Academy Pediatric Special Needs practitioners and doctors who are devoted to serving this population, these parents and these kids. And I've only heard phenomenal things about you and what your organization's all about. And we've had clients from Australia, and it was nice to be able to point them to a resource in their country. So I think going back to the secret, nutrigenomics, I hear that word and I kind of have an idea of what it's all about, but I think it's something that's not widely understood. So can you focus on that word, that opportunity for parents to embrace nutrigenomics, and feel free to give any background in terms of how you got into this. And I know you have many passions, so I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Len. Absolutely. It's the word nutrigenomics. The secret's actually in the word. Nutri it's a shortened version of nutrition and genomics. And so what we're doing is looking at each person's individual genome, looking at their genes. And this technology has been developed where you can turn your genes on and off. So you can turn them up or down using nutrition. So everything we eat actually turns our genes on or off. And one of the biggest problems we have these days compared to, say, 100 years ago, when we actually ate real food that we grew in our garden in the backyard and our food turned our genes on and off appropriately, is that unfortunately these days, a lot of people are not necessarily eating real food. They're eating a lot of processed junk, and that's not actually food. So once it comes in a packet in the supermarket, it's been processed and it's something else, and our bodies have a difficult time recognizing what it is. If you get it out of your garden or from the market and it was growing yesterday, that's food. And your body knows what to do with it. So what we've been able to do over the years has been a labour of love over many, many years, is figuring out and sifting through the research, looking for specific genes that might be associated with autism and ADHD, anxiety, depression, those sorts of things, PANDAS, OCD, lots of things, lots of neurodevelopmental genes. We've been sifting through and finding all of the genes that have been proven in the literature to be associated with those neurodevelopmental disorders and what can be done about it. So they have to be proven, it has to be shown in a research paper that a certain food or supplement has changed the expression of that gene in a positive direction. And if that's the case, we put that in our gene panel. And that's why this is so powerful and so so exciting because we've got over 700 genes now, SNPs. They're called SNPs. It's a fancy word for a variant. So what happens is you get, when we're born, we've got one strand of DNA from our dad and one strand of DNA from our mum. That's just the way it works. So it's nobody's fault. It just is, because your dad got his strands of DNA from his mum and dad, and your mum got her strands of DNA from her mum and dad. So we don't point fingers. If something's gone a little bit haywire somewhere, it's no one's fault. It just is. Okay? And so what can happen quite often is mum might be carrying some kind of gene that's not exactly great, not ideal, but she's not necessarily expressing it. So she doesn't realise she's got it. And dad's carrying that gene that's not exactly great. So, and he's not expressing it. But then when mum and dad come together, the child has a 1 in 4 chance of getting the double copy of that not great gene. And that can happen. And then that's what we're looking for. So it's generally those double variants that cause more issues. Not always, but generally. And we have, as I was saying, isolated at least 700. And the good news is we can do things to change it. So we can't change the DNA itself. That stays the same. One strand came from dad, one strand came from mum. That's the same for your whole life, from the second you're born till the second you die. That's it. But we can change the expression. So what we know is that your DNA is affected by your environment. It can be turned on and off by environmental factors. And that can be exercise, it can be lack of sleep, it can be good food, bad food, it can be, some kind of environmental assault. So we're now in a very toxic world, again, compared to 100 years ago, even 50 years ago. When I was a kid, we didn't have plastics and BPAs and fertilizers and, these sort of awful herbicide sprays and just ghastly things that we've introduced these days. Everything was in paper bags and glass bottles, and we hadn't invented pesticides yet when I was little, so my mum didn't have to go to a special organic market to get a little wedge of organic pumpkin for $12. It just wasn't, there was nothing apart from organic food when I was little. I was just really lucky. So our generation were the last ones to grow up clean. We didn't have to navigate this mess, and unfortunately nowadays it's much, much harder. Much, much harder. The children are being born into a toxic soup through no fault of their own. Right. Not their fault. They didn't ask for this. It's just where they landed.
No, but it's absolutely true. And before we dive into toxicity and the importance of the environment, which we've had so many episodes hitting different, very important topics, just to rewind a little bit, because what you've said obviously is you said some powerful things, including the concept that yes, your genes are your genes, but it's not as if, okay, they are what they are and there's nothing that you can do about it. This concept that you're talking about in terms of the expression of the genes is like, so epigenetics, right? The interplay of your genetics and your DNA with the environment is the really key thing to understand, which is why there's a lot of things you can do to help your body.
Can be done.
To play defense against the environmental toxins. But then specifically with food, with nutrients, there's a very powerful way of helping any unique body to compensate for perhaps if their genes, not that you have good or bad hands, like the hand that you're dealt genetically, it is what it is.
That's right.
And that's where I know there's a lot of controversy, within the space of like what people are doing to address the autism epidemic, right? There's organizations, not-for-profits, that are looking for the gene that is behind it, and it's clearly not going to be as simple as, we found the autism gene.
We've found 700 autism genes.
Right,
we have absolutely found the genes that underpin autism, for sure. We absolutely have. The point is, it's a complex soup. There is a lot of things going on. It's not just toxins. And we can regulate those genes. But what's so exciting about this is that we can do it naturally. They don't need drugs. All of this can be figured out. So, I try and liken it to a fire. This is an analogy I use. The house is on fire. These kids are very, very inflamed, and they're actually born inflamed. We can see that when we do their genomics. They're actually overexpressing inflammation genes. That's these variants. They're carrying these variants through no fault of their own. It's just the hand they were dealt. And they're already at birth highly inflamed. Their brain is already on fire. And then we go and basically assault them with a whole bunch of new environmental assaults from birth. And it just fuels the fire, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not their fault. It's just the way it is. And so what we want to do first is turn down those inflammation genes. That's the very first thing we want to start with, is down regulating those inflammation genes. And we can do that with food and supplements. And it's very successful. It's very quick. And when you put out the fire, magical things start to happen. Then we can start dealing with all of the other things, because there are hundreds and hundreds of things. You are 100% correct. There is no one autism gene, and that's been a misnomer for a really long time, and it's a silly way of looking at it. There are hundreds and hundreds of things. Lots and lots of pathways are affected. So inflammation pathway, detoxification pathway, mitochondrial pathways, oxidative stress pathways, neurotransmitter pathways. There's so much going on.
Yeah.
A lot of people have heard of the methylation pathway. It's just one of the many, many, many pathways. So,
Right.
There are pathways around cognition. There are pathways around speech. There's so many things that we need to deal with. And the main thing is that we need to do it in the right order. We can't come at it from the wrong order.
Yep. No, that's yeah, let's go there, because I think the order, the sequencing is incredibly important. And I appreciate your more expansive view with respect to, okay, with all 20,000 or so genes in terms of, and it is obviously very complex, but that from your count, at least 700 are related to these symptoms that are being expressed that we call autism, right? Like, so when you say an autism gene, I think there's people who may feel like, okay, well, that's, once we identify it, okay, then, that will in some way solve the problem. But like, to your point, it's so much more complex. There's a lot of genes. Clinically, there's absolute evidence that those genes, and we can call them, let's say, autism related genes, that if that's something that your child's experiencing, important to know which ones, and therefore what you practice and what Intelligence DNA helps people with is, okay, so you have this SNP, this variant, and what are your options that are available? Not us guessing what might help, but like what
we know
shown. So at least for a parent who's devoting time, energy, and resources, the precision is the key. Okay, we know exactly which ones, what the science says, and therefore here are the few things that you might be able to do to help the body with something that might be hampered based on that interplay of genetics and environment.
Absolutely correct. It's precision medicine. So each child is looked at individually, and we are finding new genes literally every single day, and we continuously add them to this panel. So when I started back in 2012, we knew of 54 SNPs, and we're well over 700 now. So we're constantly adding to it. We're constantly refining it, and it just gets bigger and better every day.
And by the way, when we started and we did some genomics early on with our son, he was diagnosed moderate to severe on the spectrum in 2008. And at that time, after we got the information back, it was all about the MTHFR, the one methylation cycle. You have this SNP, and I have the double mutation in MTHFR. My son has a single, and basically it was very simple. Okay, methylfolate, something like that, or methylcobalamin. Take that, and that's pretty much all you can do. And obviously, we know now that it's much more complicated than that. And even if you have the MTHFR mutation, what specifically you do may be very different, and it's going to be very unique to that individual, correct?
Very much. In fact, it's one of my pet peeves, to be honest. And people come in and they panic, and they'll come in and they say, oh, my son's got the MTHFR. And I say, but don't really mind. It's okay. 3/4 of the world have the MTHFR variant. It's really not a big deal. There are 22,000 genes. It's really it's this much about what we care about. It's particularly insignificant. Not entirely. If depending, there are some kids that need a lot of help in that area, but by and large, no, not so much. There are many, many other genes that are way, way more problematic and very easy to fix. So we'll find that some of these kids, they find out they've got one single variant, which is not a big deal in MTHFR, and then they are, unfortunately, doctors that don't really understand this space and don't understand the milieu and the interaction of all the other genes, will give them a huge dose of some kind of methyl tetrahydrofolate of some description, and the wheels fall off, and the child has a terrible reaction because it actually drives them into overmethylation because they didn't understand the complexity of the pathways.
Right.
So what we want to do is we're looking at all of the genes in all of the pathways and carefully looking at where are the blockages and what bits need to be upregulated and which bits need to be downregulated so that we can very gently regulate the child and help bring them to their full potential, whatever that might be. You know, it's much more precision medicine.
Yes,
so,
yes.
You're quite right. Back in the day, that was all we had, and people got very excited about it, and now it's the least exciting gene in my
well,
in the stable.
Things evolve and knowledge, you know, I mean, it's exponential how much we're learning.
Yes.
But when you or I toss around the term complexity, I think only if you're able to really like dive in, like you're a researcher, scientist, when you really see what the sequencing of how these cycles work, it is so complex, which is why it just defies a simple, oh, that one's broken, we're going to give this, because that has implications for what's next. And there's such an interplay, which is why the Intelligence DNA, you know, software, the way of analyzing it, it's impossible for a human to get their head around all the different interrelationships. So I think
I'd have to agree with you there.
Yeah,
that's very true. And we don't treat individual SNPs. So there's over 700 SNPs on the panel, but that doesn't mean you end up with 700 supplements. And not everyone's going to have every SNP, not at all. But even if they had 200 of the 700, just saying, imagine if you had that many, or even 100, it still doesn't mean you end up on 100 things. We're treating pathways. We're trying to upregulate. We're down-regulating inflammation. We want to turn down inflammation, the whole pathway. And the beauty of nutrigenomics is that there are certain supplements which actually act on hundreds of genes. So you can end up with a very tight supplement regime, which can regulate hundreds and hundreds of genes. You don't need to be on hundreds of supplements. That's why this is super duper powerful. We're actually working out exactly what the child needs. I see a lot of parents that say, oh, I saw this on Pinterest, I saw this on YouTube, and I saw this and I bought this one and I bought that. And what do you think of this probiotic? And what do you think of this nutrient? And the poor child is having, 50 or 60 tablets every day because there's this giant scattergun approach. Because they heard from so-and-so in a mum's group that this, taurine made my kid do really well. And someone else says, oh, choline was really good for mine. And then someone else says, oh, this methyl tetrahydrofolate is really great. And this poor child is just doped up on all these things. And they don't know if they're Arthur or Martha because they don't necessarily need all of those things. Probably don't.
Well, I'm going to raise my hand. Guilty as charged, right? Because and again, this is all coming from a great place. A parent,
of course it is, from love. Of course it is.
We want to do whatever we can,
the best we can,
and we don't want to miss something that could help. So, I mean, we would make our son a smoothie that had so many supplements added, like dozens of supplements, and it was really that. Going through that process that I was like, okay, this just makes no sense, especially since if I was tested, I couldn't explain what each of those was doing, like why we were adding those supplements. We just kept adding as we heard things. So everything you just described, we've been there, and I can't echo more or reinforce more what Heather is saying. The key is actually what are the few things that will have the most impact?
Yes. And it's really important, and I'm not in any way detracting from these parents because I get it. It's from a heart space. I get it. I'm a parent of two kids that were on the spectrum, and one was terribly severe, and I turned over every rock. I understand that just urgent feeling. Everyone talks about early intervention. You're like, this might work. This might be the one. This just might be it. We don't need to do that anymore. There's no might be's anymore. We can actually help you. We can target it. We can actually see the child's true sequence and actually tell you. We have this thing called a hotspot, and it's really, really exciting. It will give the top variants that are in the rarest variants that child is carrying. So if I can preface that a little bit to try and explain it. If you have something like MTHFR, which is in like pretty much 2/3 to 3/4 of the population, if 2/3 of people in the world are walking around with a variant, is it really that significant? Really? Probably not. If it's in 0.2% of the population, that's probably very, very significant if you've got that one, because it's so rare. So what Intellex does is it pulls up the top rare SNPs, the top rare variants. So it's like this giant spotlight on what are your child's specific triggers. Where are they tripping over? What is really the biggest issues for your child? And when we go through that hotspot, I can't tell you, it gives me goosebumps every time, because the child's symptoms exactly line up with those genes every single time. Every time. They're a fussy eater and they're having trouble holding on to their zinc, for instance, and they're having all these ADHD issues. And sure enough, look at all these neurotransmitter genes lining up. They've got all these speech issues or attention issues, cognition issues. Look at that, all the choline genes, and or they're very slouchy and they have trouble holding a pen and they can't sit up and so on. Look at that in their top, the top rare genes are these mitochondrial genes. Look at that. I mean, it's just gobsmacking. I don't know if you use that word in America. Anyway, very shocking, like amazing. It's so incredible when I see it matching the symptoms every single time, and you just go, excellent, let's go. We've got a blueprint here now for your child. And the really beautiful thing about it is we have the research-driven supplements and foods that have been proven to fix that, to regulate that SNP and fix that SNP. So we can change it. We can change the expression. And you just see these beautiful changes in the children. And just, it's so nice to see as the inflammation on their brain comes down, they don't have the headaches anymore. We're just helping them have a better quality of life. Even if they don't end up speaking, which of course is always our goal. Every parent wants to hear their child's voice. I understand that. I wanted to hear my son's voice more than life's, I get it. But it doesn't always happen. Not always. And especially, we're still searching. We keep looking, because there's obviously more genes we haven't found yet. I will never give up on any child. They will become part of our family, and we just keep trying and trying and trying and trying. But it doesn't always happen, but we can usually give them a much better quality of life at the very least.
Right. Yeah, I found it's very useful to drop the expectations, because that causes a lot of stress and anxiety. Yes. And really, it's just, how can you help your child thrive? So if there's something happening uniquely within their genome, where giving a supplement or something that the body needs to help them overcome, and to just, again, for their bodies to operate the way they're designed, so that ultimately you have less brain inflammation, less gut inflammation. And when that happens, when the body is really kind of more running on all cylinders the way it's designed, then yes, all those things that if you check enough boxes, you get the autism diagnosis, tend to correct because of the body's natural healing capability.
Absolutely correct. The body really wants to heal itself. And as we remove the toxins, and I'm sure you've had heaps of podcasts on that, so I don't need to go down that road, but removing the toxins and upregulating the detoxification genes gives these kids a fighting chance of actually managing to navigate their way through the toxic soup we currently live in. Right. Reducing the inflammation with the supplements and reducing inflammatory foods from their diet gives them a fighting chance. Everything we can do to manipulate the environment to be favourable to them as much as possible, and giving them whatever their genes need to be upregulated, all of these things will help them just to make it. Where neurotypical people just breeze on through, these kids are really behind the 8 ball. So we do a lot of work with the gut as well. That's really important. A lot of the children that we see, most of them, the vast majority, were through no judgment. I did it too. I ended up with an emergency Caesar. My son just wouldn't come out. He was stuck. He was sideways and he was stuck. So they ended up doing an emergency Caesar. I get it. It happens. But the vast majority of the kids we see are cesarean section. And a lot of them are also bottle fed. They haven't had any breastfeeding. And so they haven't received that the microbiome at the initial stage. It's, the good microbiome, those infant commensals that they should have received. And it might not sound like a big deal, but it really is, because 98% of our serotonin is made in our gut. It's not just from the gene side of things. It's actually the bacteria that help us to get the B12 and so on out of our food and make our neurotransmitters. So if they haven't got the gut flora, they can't do those things. They can't digest their food properly. They can't get the nutrients out. You might be giving them this amazing organic diet, and there's this saying, you are what you eat. It's not actually true. You are what you absorb. If you can't absorb it, if you can't use it, if your gut flora can't metabolize it, if you don't have the gut flora to metabolize it, well, it didn't work. So we have to approach this from so many different angles, not just the genes. So, and I'm not saying don't eat organic food. Please eat organic food wherever possible. Grow whatever you can. And obviously we're big advocates for that. And we are very big advocates for gluten-free and dairy-free diet, because gluten and dairy are very inflammatory. And we find when we sequence that these children usually have HLA haplotyping, so they have celiac haplotyping, or they have leaky gut haplotyping, or they have other leptin haplotyping. They have all sorts of issues where they can't digest these grains properly, and particularly gluten. And we use a lot of glyphosate these days on the grains. So it's not just gluten. And rice is drowned in arsenic. We're just finding that a lot of the grains are very, very toxic. So they're incredibly inflammatory for the gut.
And that's why if we do have rice, by the way, we are rinsing that in water, over and over and over because of the arsenic content. Even in organic rice, you're going to find it.
100%. You need to buy organic everything. And if you're going to give them grains, which is not our recommendation because they're highly inflammatory, but if you are, you're right. You soak them to help get the phytates out and try your hardest to get the toxins out. It's very difficult. Mm-hmm. And this is the thing. It wasn't like this 50 years ago. When people go, well, why is autism so high now? And it's like, well, we've done some pretty wacky stuff to our environment that we really shouldn't have done. But it's important that we help also get the gut flora right. That's important. The gut is actually the first pass for toxins. It's our gut flora that try and process the cadmium and lead and mercury and aluminum, you call it. These things are normally processed by our gut bacteria before they even get a chance to get into the bloodstream. If you don't have those bacteria, the body can't do it. Right. And so bang, they're in the bloodstream, and if you've got particular variants, there are, ghastly toxins. Some of the kids, I understand this is a controversial statement, but I've definitely seen it in my own life with my own son and many, many parents that come through the clinic where they say something terrible happened straight after he was vaccinated with X, whatever that might be, whether it's a flu vaccine or MMR or DTaP or what have you. I have two kids, both vaccinated on the same day, and that it was both their first vaccine for both children, and one went down with the DTaP and one went down with the MMR. And when I eventually got to the point of being able to sequence them, this many, many years later, because that's what started my journey. It's like, what just happened? And my molecular background made me think there's got to be genes underpinning this. There's got to be some reason that one child had genes that reacted to this and one child had genes that reacted to that, and that's just immediately where my brain went because of my genetic background. And I know other people don't think that way, but that's where my brain went. And sure enough, we've found a ton of genes that are related around how they clear lead and mercury and aluminum and all these things. And when they have the variants in those genes, they can't clear those things properly. They're adjuvants in the vaccines. And that's why not every kid tips over, but some children do. So we just want to be respectful of those parents that say, look, I know you won't believe me, nobody does, but I noticed, he started screaming straight after the vaccine and didn't sleep all night and screamed for the next 18 months and, lost all his speech and lost his toileting and regressed and everything went pear-shaped. And I swear to you, it happened straight after the vaccine. And I say, I understand. I believe you. I totally believe you. And we can do things to help. And we can help to reverse that damage, and we can help to recover your darling baby. And and help them to clear those adjuvants out of their body and try and help to regenerate their neurons that were damaged. And there are things we can do for that. We use GCMAF for neuronal regeneration. There's so many things we can do to help those children that were, through no fault of their own, severely damaged. And so we're very respectful of that. So if that has been an issue for some of your listeners, yes, I believe you. It's true. And for those that wasn't the assault for their child, and they go, well, my kid wasn't vaccinated and they still have autism, I understand. For you, it's a different underpinning. And we look at the genetic underpinning when we do the sequencing. It was something else. Something else is underpinning those symptoms that we call autism. Just, it's been given the name autism, but, what is it? The lack of speech, or the lack of eye contact, or the lack of socializing, or the lining up of the toys, those sort of OCD symptomology, or is it around their socialization? Is it around their fussy eating? What is it? There are different genes underpinning the different symptoms. We'll get to the bottom of all of them. That's the beauty of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter how you got there. That doesn't really matter. We can help undo it, whatever it was.
But it does matter in a sense that every child has had their own unique exposure, right? To whether it's environmental toxins or some form of trauma, whether it's a physical trauma, emotional trauma, and just because I'm kind of obsessed with root cause and always looking to uncover the root cause, and I think it gets a little bit tricky here. So let me just tee up my understanding and tell me what.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It doesn't really matter what the root cause is. We'll help you find it. We can help you elucidate the root cause of the problem.
But if you take a step back in terms of what society thinks, right? Like autism, there's many people still stuck in the dark ages that think, okay, it's just brain injury and there's nothing you can do. And then there's some people who think, well, maybe we'll know what to do once we find that gene. And so my understanding and how I'm processing it is, hey, there's a lot of potential root causes of what's behind the symptoms that your child might be exhibiting. And
100%.
With curiosity of uncovering what those might be, most roads lead to some state of chronic inflammation that exists. And it's not that your genes caused it, it's just that your unique genetic makeup makes it so that that state of inflammation will persist unless you do something about it. So I look at the genetic thing for me is, okay, maybe your genes aren't the reason your child has autism specifically, but they definitely could be the reason why your child doesn't improve unless you address those unique variants for that child and meet them where they are and give them what they need. Does that ring true for you?
What we would say is that we have genetic predispositions and environmental triggers.
Yep.
And it's not just autism. Someone might have genetic predispositions to osteoporosis.
Sure.
Or macular degeneration, or heart disease, or, I could go on all day. Because, you know that your dad had a heart attack and your grandma had osteoporosis. And, so people understand the concept of a family line. There's been mum died of a heart attack, her mum died of a heart attack, her mum, or usually dad, but, I'm just making a silly example where you go, well, heart attacks run in the family or so on. You hear these things where people say diabetes runs in the family. These things have a genetic underpinning. We understand that. I think people really do, at some sort of level, get it. But that's true. Okay? So there is a genetic underpinning to this. And it does run in the families. And you'll often think about it and think, oh, yeah, when I think about it, my grandpa was a little bit quirky.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't really like it when we came over to visit. Or he'd go sit in the corner and hide behind his newspaper. And you think about it and realise that he was, he excelled in his particular field at work and rose to the top very quickly. And when you think about it, you realise, you know what? He was a bit Asperger's, now that I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It was there. Those genes were there, but they didn't have to deal with the assaults. They didn't have the environmental assaults that we do. So they weren't triggered to the same extent. But those genes are going to be in the family line. I know people don't want to hear that, but it's true. They will be there. It will be somewhere in your family line. So there are genetic underpinnings to these various things, the higher anxiety or the higher propensity towards this or that or the other thing. And there's no judgment there. That's okay. Someone else has a higher propensity towards breast cancer or whatever. It just is. Well, we're all going to die of something.
Right.
Eventually.
But that expression is like, if you're comparing yourself to your child, okay, well, why, if there is such a genetic component? And I think that's where I think people wildly underestimate how much more toxic the environment is now than even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, let alone 50 years ago.
50 years ago. And you're right. And that is 100% true. And they're also not taking into consideration that we can be carrying something. And your partner, the mum and the dad are carrying it. And when they come together, having two copies is so much worse than having one copy. And so the child is expressing something much more fully, and so that, you can have two brown-eyed parents come together and have a blue-eyed child. The blue eyes are recessive. Doesn't make it good or bad, they just are. Okay, so two brown-eyed parents have a 1 in 4 chance of having a blue-eyed child. So it's the same sort of thing with these autism genes. You can be carrying these genes and you come together and then the child gets the double whammy. Just is. That's okay. We can do something about it. We don't want to be judging. We don't want to be saying, oh, it's his fault.
Yeah.
It's his family. It's his fault. No. It's a combination of genes and in this awful environment that we currently live in, which triggered that combination of genes. It just is. Yeah. So let's not blame anyone or blame anything. Let's just get about fixing it.
It's an incredible waste of energy going really in those directions. So I definitely want to dive into more specifically the power of food and nutrigenomics. But before we do that, just with the double copy that you mentioned, just to give a simple example for our listeners, and I'll use MTHFR just because it's the simplest one. So for me, MTHFR, that particular gene, I have the double. My son has a single copy, meaning he got it from me, not my wife. I happen to have 2 copies, so I got it both from my mom and dad. So the way I understand it is that because of, like, my son, instead of that gene operating at 100%, if he's got one SNP, the one from me, not my wife, then maybe that gene's operating around 70% capacity. Yeah. And if you get the double copy, like what I have, then you're kind of running at 30%. So for this individual gene, if you have the double copies that you're mentioning, just look at it where, hey, instead of that gene operating as it fully can, it's significantly hampered, something maybe around 30%. Would you agree with that?
And it can be less. It can be 1%. The double copy can be catastrophic for some genes, not all. And this is why it's so powerful to do the genomics, because they're all different. All the genes are different, all the pathways are different, and that's why I have so little regard for MTHFR. It is not the one that we're worried about. There are plenty more that are way, way more important for your child to get right. If they've had an assault and they can't clear the aluminum, we need to get that out, because it's accumulating on the brain and it's neurotoxic, and that's way more important to me.
Got it.
I'm much more worried about any neurotoxins, anything that's causing brain cell death. That's something that I'm going to panic about. And that's a strong word, because we can fix it. I'm concerned when I see those sorts of SNPs. Right. And that's the sort of thing that we want to turn around. So there are things like ubiquinol, so the CoQ10 gene. When you've got double variants in there, basically it's 99%, not working. You're in a very bad way, and you're going to have significant mitochondrial issues. So your mitochondria are your body's energy factory. That makes your ATP. And if you can't do that properly, that sounds like a good way to be. That sounds like a good way to go through life. So it's a terrible way to struggle through life. And so these kids, they're constantly being told, sit up straight, hold your pencil. They can't.
Yeah, they literally don't have the energy.
They can't do it. And no amount of you yelling at them, not you specifically, I'm using the general you, no amount of society telling them that they should this and they should that will make any difference. They just can't do it. And we need to support them, the poor little things. We need to give them what they need so that they can. And then when you give the body what it needs, it starts to heal itself and magical things happen. And then they come to life, and it's just wonderful watching them blossom, whatever that might be. We can bring them to their full potential with the genes we currently have. That's all I can promise. The ones we have, we know how to regulate. There are undoubtedly hundreds more we haven't even discovered yet. I don't know about them yet. But we're constantly looking, and we're constantly refining, and we're constantly improving, and we'll just keep going.
Yep. And when you say give them what they need, right, that brings us to nutrients, right? Like
yes.
that is the key to understanding
Yes.
what nutrients for my child are what's most needed, and therefore this field of nutrigenomics.
Yes.
And you can do that through supplements, but otherwise the power of actual real food
Real food
is the biggest strategy, right?
It really is. And the nutrients that your child needs might be completely different to the nutrients that your best friend's child with autism needs. You're in the same autism playgroup, but they end up on a completely different regime, And parents sometimes say to me, oh, but my friend Sally's kid is on this supplement. Why aren't I on that supplement? Why isn't my kid? It's like, the whole point of you doing this was to personalize it for your child. Please stop looking at what everybody else is doing.
Right.
Your child's autism is underpinned by these genes. Your child needs these things to thrive. That person's child is underpinned by different genes and needs different things to thrive. We're all unique. We're all individuals. We don't want to treat everyone the same. We want to treat your child as an individual and give them the nutrients that they need, that their body needs. And you're absolutely right. As much organic food as possible. The soils are nutrient depleted these days, compared to back when I was little. Anything we can do to get these nutrients into these kids will be helpful.
Right.
The body wants to heal itself. The body's desperate to heal itself. The body wants to work at full capacity.
Right. And it's such a natural tendency for parents to look around, see what other people are doing. So it may be unsettling to hear the message that Dr. Way is sharing, but it's also the most exciting thing, because now we have the ability to personalize it, which is why if you're working with a practitioner, as an example, and I'm not trying to talk negative about your practitioner, but some doctors, very well-meaning, very well-credentialed, if they are still advocating the same playbook that they were 20 years ago, and every kid's the same lab tests, the same treatments, then you have to question, because it would be great if it was that simple, but because of how complicated each child, the unique situation for each child, that one-size-fits-all plan or approach, I mean, it could be somewhat beneficial, but again, if you're looking to really meet your child where they are, you need more precision.
Yes. And I agree with you. I'm not bagging out those doctors. They helped me immensely 20 years ago when I needed help, because that's all we had.
Sure.
And we did have a scattergun approach, because they had found that fish oil seemed to be helpful. So everyone got put on fish oil, and so on. And vitamin D. Look, it seems to be helpful. So everyone got put on, and I'm not knocking them. They were doing their best with the information they had to hand. We hadn't done full genome sequencing yet 20 years ago. It hadn't even been done, hadn't been invented. This stuff is new. So as the technology expands, we can, as you said beautifully, eloquently said, if they're still using a playbook from 20 years ago, I'm sorry, but we've moved on. They're still using the horse and cart, and we've moved on to cars. So, and I guess other people would say, are we still using petrol cars when we've moved on to, electric cars or whatever? There's just, we're constantly, could be a terrible example, but anyway, we're constantly moving on, and it's wonderful. The more we can personalize, the better the chances that your child will respond to those treatments. And look, inflation is crazy. It's getting harder and harder to just live these days, just paying the bills and the electricity and the food. And we don't have the money to be wasting on supplements that aren't actually working and possibly hindering. And particularly, it's so important to do things in the right order. If they've been given the wrong maybe the right supplement, but at the wrong time, in the wrong order, you can mess everything up. It's really important that we do things in the right order. So we have to put the fire out first. The house is on fire. No point bringing a new couch into a burning house.
Right.
Okay? The new couch is this super duper expensive supplement, and it's fabulous in 6 months' time when they're ready for it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you bring it in now and you're paying, $150 for this bottle of tablets, total waste of time. It was burnt up in the fire. And then the parent says, I tried that and it didn't work. I said, well, you tried it at the wrong time.
Right.
That's why it didn't work.
Yep.
We need to do the right thing in the right order. I can't stress that enough. Please do things in the right order.
Right. And that's where we could talk for hours just about that concept as well. So, but in general, though, yes, a first step is stop doing things that harm. So if there are toxic exposures of all kinds, I mean, this is why you would not eat processed food or why you would
Yeah,
pay the extra to eat organic. But if
yeah,
you stop doing harm and then do what you can to build more of a strong foundation, then down the road, there's a lot of other things, a lot of modalities that could help. But the sequencing is super important. And I know you help parents in Australia and across the globe with your
yeah.
practice. So if
We certainly do.
you could, yeah, explain to people where they can find out more about what you do and how to reach you.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely. So I run a centre that has an enormously long name. It's called the Australian Centre for Genomic Analysis, because what we do is analyse genomes, both the body and the microbiome. We've also developed an autism-specific microbiome test. So we analyse sequences. We don't run the sequences. We analyse them and help people to personalise their intervention plan. So instead of having that ridiculously long name in a website, it's actually TACGA, the initials, tacga.com.au. And that's where you can find us. And yes, we service all over the world. We can send the kits anywhere in the world and organise supplements through, we can give you where to get them in your country and foods and so on, and organise all of that. So by all means, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to help you.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to provide your perspective because, again, this is an area that I think is very confusing for people. It's exciting, but also kind of knowing why this matters, how to proceed. So I think you've demystified that to a great extent. And again,
I hope so. It's not
well,
scary. It might seem scary, but I promise it's actually really easy once you get going.
truly. And again, I'll include in the show notes links to where people can find you. But again, I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation today, and really appreciate what you and your organization are doing.
Thanks, Len, and you too. Thanks so much for doing this podcast and helping the parents know how to navigate things. It's a scary thing when you first get a diagnosis and you've got no idea what to do. So thank you for providing this service. You're a wonderful human being. I'm so pleased we met.
No doubt these parents are amazing. Anything we can do to help them step into their true power, we love doing this work. So continued great success for you and your organization.
Thank you so much.